I'm Sarah Outen, and I'm the author of Dare to Do, and I'm on the Group Ride podcast.
You are listening to episode 8 of the Group Ride podcast. This is a podcast that's focused on cycling in the Pacific Northwest and beyond. I'm your host, Wes Salmon. Let's get started. Today I have a great interview with Sarah Outen, where she explains what it's like to traverse the globe by bike and boat, traveling over 25,000 miles over 4.5 years. Then I check in with the Group Ride tip line for a few more tips for the first-time Pacific Northwest bike commuter. After that, I sit down with 2 riding buddies for the first time in a series of Group Ride podcast roundtable discussions. And finally, I take a look at the Ride of the Week for episode 8. Clip in, riders, the Group Ride podcast is rolling out. Today I am with Sarah Outen, author of Dare to Do, Taking on the Planet by Bike and Boat. She has had a number of amazing adventures over the last few years, and she's going to tell us about her most recent one. So Sarah, your new book's coming out, I believe, next week in the US and Canada. Before I get into the book, I want to talk about how you got involved in this sort of thing. So what is your background in long-distance endurance sports?
I suppose my run into endurance sports really started as a child, just by spending lots of time outside and kind of making up my own little journeys of exploration, really, around the places that we lived. Whether it was going off for big long walks with the dog by myself, or cycling, or sort of running, I just found myself pushing my limits as a youngster, and combined with kind of sports at school and opportunities to do outdoor pursuits and little expeditions and journeys. That's really where it's all come from. It's all fed from there.
So your goal to explore kind of led you to go long distances to do that exploring.
Yeah, I think so. So as a teenager, I really first appreciated just how much I loved being the engine behind my journeys. I love that combination of sort of muscle power, your wit, and your skills, combined with what the weather allows you to do. And I loved how that brought me into contact with wildlife and allowed me to explore different places. Like in the kayak, for example, you get to be out on the water, and then you're sort of at that really interesting interface between land and sea as you journey around a coastline. And so I think that drive's always been there. And then it was whilst I was at university that I really sort of was captivated by the idea of rowing across an ocean. That's where I first heard about the idea. And my first big solo journey was to row solo across the Indian Ocean. And that journey sort of gave me the confidence, I suppose, the knowledge and sort of the inspiration to think that I'd like to make a long journey across land and sea. And that was London to London via the world, in which I rowed and cycled and kayaked a loop of the Northern Hemisphere.
Right. And that's what your new book is based on. Tell me what the logistics are for planning such a trip like that. I would imagine just the planning takes months. That's
right. So we spent about 15 months planning the journey before I set out. We probably could have spent double that amount of time because it was forecast to be really quite a long journey. We thought it would be 2.5 years. It actually ended up being 4.5 years. And it was set right from the start to be quite complex and certainly very challenging in its aims and the constraints which would sit around it in terms of those logistics, as we mentioned, the timings, the weather, the physicality of it, and then just making the whole thing happen in terms of raising the finance, managing a team, and so on. So it really actually became an exercise in progress, I suppose, because the nature of the journey being that stage led on to stage led on to stage meant that we were constantly planning for the next stage, even a few stages ahead, and really having to respond to whatever happened. And in some cases, they were quite big changes that, the journey was forced to make based on the weather, for example, losing a boat in the Pacific Ocean. So, yeah, the logistics of such a big, long, complex, expensive trip were pretty challenging and continued to be right until the end, really.
How big was your team?
My team sort of fluxed depending on who was needed at the time, whether I was in a static period or a sort of more active period. but it probably ranged between about 7 and 12 people, a mix of professionals and volunteers. So on that team, there'd be a project manager, a kayaking partner, a couple of doctors, a psychotherapist, accountant, logistics manager, someone in charge of the web stuff, a couple of other folks sort of just involved with whatever needed doing, a weather router, and various others, PR manager. So it was quite a mission to both set that team up and keep that going as well. It definitely wasn't just me making the journey happen.
And how many of those people came with you on the individual legs of your journey?
There was just Justine Kagenvan. She's a really brilliant sea kayaker. She accompanied me on the kayaking legs of the journey and filmed me at a couple of other stages as well. So it was Justine, and then I had someone come out and join me at the start and the finish of each ocean crossing, just to help get set up with the boat as well.
Okay.
So it was just me on the road and everybody else was back home, but really playing an active, very active role at home as well. I often think it's harder for the people at home than it is out in the field sometimes.
So since this is a podcast about cycling for the most part, I'm going to focus on the two-wheel aspects of your journey. So in your book, you cover your adventure, like 25,000 miles, 4.5 years circling the globe. You left London and headed east, I believe, covering what had to be some amazing terrain. What was the hardest part about biking across Europe and Asia?
That first stage of the journey, sort of first major stage of the journey from sort of France out to Japan, was probably really difficult, or made even more difficult by the fact I had such a time pressure on me, because the goal was for me to be on the east coast of Asia with enough time for me to kayak over to the Russian island of Sakhalin and then kayak and cycle down to Japan. So right from the get-go in the April when I left, I felt so pressured by the need to make progress. It always felt like I couldn't cycle far enough, like I just needed to keep on pushing. And that level of pressure over a sustained period of time, whilst you're exerting yourself physically and dealing with, I suppose, the settling of the project. There were quite a few things that felt a little bit tricky in that first period, just, getting used to being away, working with a team remotely and so on. So all of that combined really just added extra pressure to that cycling leg. And there were times when I would have liked to have just had a rest for a month or so, but it felt like I needed to keep going.
I have those feelings these days, and I'm not even traveling nearly as far as you are.
Yeah.
So you covered a lot of diverse terrain. I would imagine you also met some very memorable people. So tell me about some of the most memorable people you met on your journey.
The people were really wonderful on my journey. It felt like the further east I went from London and then from France, where I started cycling, the people became maybe an even bigger feature in my day-to-day life, because I suppose in sort of Western Europe, it felt like more familiar territory to me. I suppose I blended in a little bit more, and I also went through quite quickly. But when I started getting out sort of Eastern Europe and into Asia, I was very much the anomaly. This girl clad in lycra and a sort of traveling shirt and massive bags on a bike and flags off the back of the bike. People were curious to see what I was up to say hello, and to share with me. That was really beautiful. It was just the hospitality and warmth and kindness that I met with. In Kazakhstan, for example, people would call me in off the roadside. There'd often be long stretches, sort of 50 to 80 miles with nothing at all, until you get to these sort of outposts, these little tea houses, and people would invite me in and have me drink tea with them, which was really wonderful. I think probably my most memorable encounter came in China, where I met a young man called Gao at a petrol station one day, and he was really taken by my bike and my journey and said he wanted to have a go, but didn't know how. And I said, you just need to get a bike and go for it. And we sort of went in our different directions, and half an hour down the road, he pulled up in his car and declared that he wanted to come with me on the bus, which is not what I had been expecting, I must say. And it took a little bit persuading because I was sort of thinking, well, I've got a schedule to keep and I don't know who you are, and sort of putting all these reasons in my head why I didn't think he should come, which I look at it now, that feels really ironic because, I had just told him that anybody could ride a bike because it is just sitting on a bike and moving, one foot round after the other. So anyway, he joined me 2 days later. He'd gone and got himself a bike because he didn't even have his own bike. And we spent 35 days cycling together for about 4,000 kilometres, so 2,000 miles or so, across the Gobi Desert. So some of the sort of harshest terrain that I'd cycled through on my journey, and certainly the most extreme temperatures. So it really was a wonderful time sharing that with him. I got a lot from the experience. It was great to see how he sort of grew into himself, I suppose. He'd been way too nervous at the start to consider it on his own. But by the end, he was totally capable and helping other people fix their bikes. And just it was really beautiful to watch.
So just by seeing you come through, he went and bought a bike and decided to ride 4,000 K in 35 days or so?
Exactly that.
That's amazing,
isn't it? And I think we've all got those, versions of that where we would like to do something. Maybe it's making a change in our life. Maybe it is taking on a new project, or setting out on quite a big project that might seem too daunting. And I think whatever it is that that fits into that bracket for us, we can often be held back by our projections about what we think other people are going to think. What if we're not good enough? What if it doesn't work out? And I just love Gao's example of sort of giving himself to the journey and seeing what happens.
You have your examples of going across Europe and Asia. That was probably the longest leg of your trip on the bike, right?
Yeah, let's see. It might actually be a close tie between Europe to Asia on the bike or North America on the bike, because I think I was 7 months biking and paddling for Europe and Asia, and I think I was probably 7 or 8 months for cycling across North America. So they're both pretty similar in terms of duration, if not in distance. I cycled much further across Europe and Asia, but because the winter was so severe across North America, it took so much longer. So
after you got to Japan, I believe, you were going to head out on a boat. And that itself, and for me, freaks me out. I'm not a huge water fan, definitely not a huge in a boat solo water fan. But so how does rowing solo across the ocean work from a practical standpoint? Like, how do you sleep? How do you navigate? What are the things you have to deal with other than just the fact that you're in the ocean to make that thing work? It's
both very simple and very complex, I think, to row across an ocean. I mean, the concept is simple in that you are in a boat. The idea is you're self-sufficient in terms of all your resources, except for perhaps a satellite contact out to a team or people on land. And you row from one bit of land to the next bit of land on the other side, meaning that you're physically isolated for probably months at a time. The reality of it, of course, is more complex in that because you're going without a sail, because you're going without engines, your course isn't always direct, which means it can take a long time to get to where you're going, longer than you perhaps thought you were, because maybe the weather is adverse, there's currents doing funny things, pulling you around in circles. And of course, just as you mentioned, the sort of the practicalities, the day-to-day living at sea in a boat that's always moving, with weather that's always changing, by yourself, in my case, it can make it really difficult, makes it really challenging. I tried to keep a sort of night-day rhythm and routine to things, so I'd row during the day and sleep at night. When I sleep, the boat drifts, or if the weather's against me, I'd use what's called a sea anchor to help stop the boat drifting in the wrong direction. And I would be in contact with my support team on land, so getting weather information in and sort of bits of news and so on from home. And really it was just a case of making the most of the weather when it was good so that I could make progress and I could row, And when it was too rough, or perhaps when the currents were too strongly against me, then I'd just have to sit and wait it out. So it's a really interesting kind of mind game as much as a physical game out there.
And you spent months out there, right?
Months, yeah. So cumulatively now I've spent well over a year of my life totally alone out at sea. But the longest continuous period, sort of one continuous period, is 5 months. And that was from Japan to Alaska.
So once you landed in Alaska after that 5 months, you started your cycling journey after kayaking, I believe, from Alaska down maybe it was 100 miles.
It was quite a big kayaking journey that we had. Originally, the goal had been for me to land in Canada in my rowing boat, but the weather dictated that I headed north to the Aleutian Islands. So I actually came home for a period to train and prepare for the next leg of the journey, which would be a 1,500-mile kayak through the Aleutian Islands and up the Alaskan Peninsula. It's sort of the end of August 2014 that I got back on my bike to start cycling to the East Coast, the Atlantic coast.
And you started off in pretty much the northwest corner of North America and made your way through Canada, through northern United States, over to Massachusetts. So how did cycling through North America compare to cycling across Europe and Asia?
They were two extremes, really, such extremes. So through Asia, I went right through sort of late spring, summer and into autumn. So the summer came for me in the hottest places, the sort of Dust Bowl of Kazakhstan and the Gobi Desert in China. So really intense. And then the North American cycle, I sort of came out of autumn as I was coming up through Alaska and down into northern BC, and it started snowing. So even from sort of early autumn right through until the spring, I had snow with some really quite severe weather conditions at times, sort of the deepest winter that I'd ever experienced. I think the coldest was about -40, -45, regularly sort of kept off the roads with blizzards, ice tires, and, having to learn a whole new discipline about living and surviving in the cold. So in terms of the extremes of weather, they were worlds apart, those experiences. And certainly that affects everything else as well. The progress that you make, you're much slower in the cold. Things break more easily. The bike is more clunky because, all the oils and fluids are sort of either frozen or really viscous anyway. And we all know when we're warm, we just move much better as well. So yeah, they were both challenging in different ways. And I suppose another big difference would be the fact that through North America, I spoke the same language as the locals. So in some ways that allows perhaps a deeper connection because, you can talk more, you can ask more questions and so on.
So was the hospitality and the interest in what you were doing similar to those you were experiencing in Asia, or were people more likely to just say, oh, it's just another person on a bike?
Well, because it was the winter, there weren't really any other people on bikes. When I went through Edmonton in Alberta, Canada, and Chicago, I saw other people on bikes. And when I went through New York, I saw various bikers. But those sort of bits in between, there was just nobody else on the bikes. Up in northern BC in Canada, one of the hostesses at a little roadside diner said to me, I thought we had the last biker through a few weeks ago. And then down in Saskatchewan, sort of in the prairies, somebody said, we don't even ride out here in the summer, let alone the winter. So I really was quite an anomaly to people. And that didn't mean that people weren't hospitable. Lots of people stopped to say hello or toot their horns or offer me a ride. They really couldn't believe that I wanted to be out biking. So I actually wrote on the back of my jacket, "Don't worry, I'm okay." So both really warm experiences in terms of people's kindness and gestures.
So you mentioned your bike and the things that would break in the cold. Your bike was named Hercules, and I love when people name their bikes. That's awesome. What are some of the aspects of the bike that made this trip possible, in your opinion? Like, what piece of gear really made a difference, or was there some aspect of how the bike was built that really made this possible?
Hercules as my bike's name. He's a Dutch brand of bike, a Santos Travel Master. So they're really designed around the principle of being cart horses. That's the way I like to see him, as a cart horse. He's strong, he's sturdy, and he's fitted out with loads of great components as well. Lots of German-made components, brilliant engineering and robustness. And he did really perform over that distance through a massive range of extremes, both in terms of the luggage that I was carrying, the terrain that I cycled through, often on quite rubbish roads, and then the extremes of temperatures as well, sort of surviving the really hot end of things, and probably more importantly, the severely cold end of temperature range. So in terms of things that really worked well for me, I think it's really important to have a really decent frame if you're carrying luggage. So I carried panniers on my bike, and the tubus luggage racks were just really strong. I didn't ever have any problems with those. I often hear of people having to weld them and get them sort of refixed and bolted on and things, but I never had a squeak out of the luggage rack, so that was great. Another thing would be the dynamo hub. I think it's a Son Edilux dynamo on the front of the bike. So that's a dynamo-driven light, and it was really bright. People said that I just looked like a car when I was cycling along, and that's one thing I always took really seriously, was just being really visible, because so many friends have been knocked off bikes. Tragically, last week, British rider Mike Hall was killed out in Australia while racing. So that's always been a really serious thing for me, just visibility there. And I suppose another perhaps unique feature, or certainly was quite unique to me before I started the ride, was that Hercules has a roll-off hub. So his gear mechanism is internalised in a sort of metal casing in the hub, and he's got a belt drive instead of a chain. So that's a carbon composite belt drive. So it just reduces the maintenance need that you have with a chain. And again, that just allowed me to sort of push him through all sorts of muck and mud without really having to pay much attention to it. And that was great.
So knowing that Hercules is an amazing bike, I would imagine you still had a few issues. Like, how many flats did you have, for instance?
Well, just going across China, I reckon I had about 40 flats. The tyres would get so hot because of the sort of summer searing heat. And then there were lots of issues with exploded lorry tyres all over the road, leaving those little shards of metal. So just forever getting punctures through China. And I had a few blowouts at different times where the bead of the tyre would sort of get pushed through, and I'd have to sort of start from scratch with a new tyre. I probably swapped tyres, I want to say 10 times. Maybe I had 10 tyres in total for the journey. And that's not to say that I had bad tyres that they needed replacing each time. Sometimes it was literally swapping out because of terrain. I'd use a smoother tyre for the good road sections, maybe a knobbly tyre for the off-roady bits. And then during the winter, I'd use spiked tyres as well.
And were you swapping these tires out yourself, or did you have a pit crew so you could kind of relax?
I wish. No, I didn't have a pit crew. I was alone on the road for the most part. The way that we dealt with that, sometimes if we knew that there was going to be a big change, like coming down through the mountains in Alaska and then going into the deep winter, we'd ship out perhaps all my winter gear to a base, somebody local that we'd found or had come to us, and that would kind of be shipped on from there. Or I'd just try and find local bike shops and sort of do whatever needed to happen to get there. Sometimes, for example, that meant hitching a lift for, I don't know, once I think I hitched a lift about 150 miles, got my bike sorted, and then got another lift back to get to my pickup point, where I started. And then I carried, whatever spares felt like they would be useful at the time. You can't carry everything you need, but you can certainly carry sort of a spare tyre and tubes and bits and pieces of things that generally go wrong.
So after you finished cycling all the way to Massachusetts, you got back into a boat and paddled your way or rowed your way across the Atlantic. Tell me a little bit about that trip home.
Well, the trip home was set to be pretty exciting because it's the North Atlantic. That's always going to be an exciting ocean to row. And certainly, from my point of view, I was looking forward to being home. It had been a long and difficult, beautiful, but definitely a difficult journey. And I was ready to be home by that point. The weather certainly tested me out on the ocean. I actually only made it 2/3 of the way across before a hurricane was forecast to come directly over the top of me. And so I was picked up ahead of that system and left my boat sort of 5 hours later, and was taken back to shore on a passing ship. So it was quite a phenomenal ocean in many respects. Probably, well, maybe, I don't know. Certainly at the time, it felt like it would probably be the last time that I'd ever be solo in a rowing boat by myself. But it was certainly beautiful and brilliant and challenging in all the ways that we imagined and more as well.
What is your next adventure now that you have conquered this trip around the world on bike and boat?
Well, I don't really use the word conquer. I don't think that we ever conquer anything. I was going to say except even ourselves, but maybe we don't even conquer ourselves. We just learn to work with ourselves. But certainly, I think nature is boss. There's no bigger boss than the natural forces. So in terms of what's happening next, well, I got married last summer, so I've nearly been married a year. I'm going to write a children's book next, and sort of long term, I've got some ideas for other journeys that I'd like to make, and other projects that I'd like to do sort of involving outdoor education. But for now, I'm just focusing on being back home.
And you're resting.
That's it. I'm resting.
So your book, Dare to Do, Taking on the Planet by Bike and Boat, will hit stores in the U.S. and Canada, I believe, on April 17th. Folks can buy it on Amazon as well as other bookstores around the internet. That's
right. And I'm hoping that in the fall I can come out to Canada and the US and do a book tour as well. So stand by for news of that.
Very cool. And if people want to find out more about your both your history as well as the other things you're working on, do you have a website they can go to?
Yeah, my website is sarahouten.com and my Twitter handle is the same, Sarah Outen.
So thank you so much for spending some time today with us, Sarah. The book, I've been reading an advanced copy as well as my wife, and she's been super inspired by it all. It comes out April 17th, and we will look forward to seeing what you do next.
Great. Thank you very much, Wes.
If you'd like more information about Sarah Outen's new book, Dare to Do, Taking on the Planet by Bike and Boat, head over to thegroupride.com/dare to do. Here's a few more great tips from the Group Ride podcast tip line. Our topic this week is tips for the first-time Pacific Northwest bike commuter.
My name is Bill, and I've been a year-round bike commuter in the Seattle area for about 5 years. My commuting tip for first-timers is also about dealing with rain. Someone gave a great tip about fenders last week. I'll add on to that and ask commuters to consider buddy flaps on those fenders to keep riders behind you from getting sprayed. Even with a good jacket, it can be pretty hard to stay dry though, so my strategy instead is to get comfortable being wet and focus on staying warm even when I'm soaked through. I'll usually also bring a separate set of clothes to ride in for the commute home, since putting on wet clothes can make for a cold start.
Those are some great tips from Bill. I purchased a few buddy flap sets in my day, and you can also make your own out of most flexible thin plastic.
My main tip would be to use the Dark Sky iPhone app for weather. It's only available on iPhone, but it's a great app that uses all of the radar weather all around you, and you can see a live map, or not just live map, but a predicted map showing, where the clear spots are going to be coming up, and it also notifies you. So it'll tell you, like rain stopping, and so you can get ready to leave for work or for home. One of the best things that not everyone can have is to have a flexible work schedule. If it's pouring rain, if you can work from home for half an hour, until it lets up for a bit, and then leave, it's a lot easier. Otherwise, just wear normal clothes, have good high waterproof shoes or boots for the winter. Keep something cooler at work to wear. I just put rain pants over my whatever I'm wearing to work, and I ride slow. That's the other tip.
Sadly, this listener did not leave their name, so I can't give them a proper thank you on the air. So if this is your tip, send me a mail at podcastfeedback@thegroupride.com and let me know. Now that we're on week 3 of the tip line, we're changing up the topic. The new topic for the Group Ride podcast tip line is this: what is the most important tool in your saddlebag? Leave your tip via voicemail at 206-651-4161 or email me an audio file of your tip at tipline@thegroupride.com. Up next is the first in a series of roundtable discussions with cyclists in the Pacific Northwest.
Hello, I'm Zaquan Peterson, but I go by Z-Dog, my nickname, and race on a local team called Fell Swoop, which is a digital application website company down in Seattle, and one of the guys that owns that company sponsors our team and rides with us as well.
Very cool. And I know you mainly from Zwift. I met you in Zwift before I met you locally, which is pretty crazy. All right, and our next guest is...
My name's Tom Sumter, and I'm a recreational cyclist. I ride with Native Planet and with Cascade's High Performance Cycling. I also do some ride leading with Cascade.
And I met you originally on one of the Chew rides probably 3 years ago, I think, when I was still doing the Chew series.
Alexa Balor's Chew series, yeah. That was kind of what started all of this.
Oh, so you too?
Was Chew a few years ago.
So that's how you got into climbing and just going on crazy gravel adventures.
Yeah, well, climbing.
Climbing mainly.
And just wanting to go out and ride hard and ride fast and finding, getting into group cycling as opposed to just logging in solo miles.
Right. So I know that you just recently did a really significant long ride. But before we get into that, I want to ask you guys both kind of like, what is your preferred riding style? Like, what is your discipline you gravitate more towards? Because I'm in the middle of, I do a lot of road, I do some mountain biking when I'm not crashing, and I do some gravel riding, may do some cross this year if my wife allows me to. All those things. Like, so Z, what is your go-to discipline right now?
Right now, I would say on the road, although the first decade I rode was on a mountain bike, and I love mountain biking. I just am hardly on the fat tires anymore.
Yeah, and you grew up in the area, so
yes.
All your mountain biking is in the Pacific Northwest.
Except for trips to Moab or Bend, Whistler.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And you put that down because you fell in love with road, or like me, you were falling off too much?
No, I in the late '90s, early 2000s, I got into racing, and I realized that my results were much better on the road than they were on the mountain bike.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
Tom, what about you? I know you did gravel. Is that your mainstay these days?
Well, I mean, yeah. So gravel's kind of new. I picked that up about a year and a half ago, I guess. I like the road. I like whatever happens to be nearby. I mean, the gravel's nice because there's no traffic, but you got to drive. And so that, driving an hour to go ride your bike for a few hours and then come back, that's a big chunk of time. And you can just get your road bike and go right out of your door and go log in 100 miles if you want and be back. Or it doesn't have to be 100. It could be, it could be 20.
Right.
It could be 12.
Well, if you want to go right out your door and get gravel, we are renting a room in my house in Duval. We do have great access to gravel.
Oh yeah,
roads.
Duval. That's right out there by the farm.
Right.
Absolutely.
But yeah, right out there by the tree farm, which you took me out there a couple of weeks ago and showed me what power looked like because I was hanging off the back and it was rough. Me and Quinn, that was a tough day.
Well, I was not showing anybody what power was that day.
I definitely know that we got left behind.
We had some strong riders with us.
Yeah, we did. We got left behind, and Quinn and I, we made a deal not to leave each other for dead so the bears wouldn't come get us. I said, I won't leave you if you don't leave me, because he knew his way out. I did not know my way out, even though
Quinn showed me most of what I know in that area. Quinn showed me.
Well, so right when the ride started, I knew I needed to find someone who I could stick with that knew how to get me out, and if that meant I had to go really, really hard, that's what I would do. Otherwise, I would find the slowest guy who could get me out of the forest.
There you go.
It happened to be Quinn, not because Quinn's slow, but he decided to have a slow day, and I think he was holding back from me. Plus, I was able to give him a ride home, so that worked out good.
That probably.
So one of the things we're talking about this week on the show is tips for the first-time commuter, someone who's excited about riding their bike in Seattle, going to work on the bike, whether they commute every single day, whether they commute in the city or on the east side, or wherever they commute in Western Washington. A number of people called in with some tips. Some of the obvious ones around fenders, around breathable rain jackets, wide tires when riding around railroad tracks, all those good things. I figured I would let you guys kind of pile on and tell me some of the other tips as commuters yourself, either currently or in the past, that you found beneficial when first learning how to commute in Seattle or on the east side. So, Tom, I'll let you go first.
Well, I want to just emphasize or second, get fenders and put the widest tires that'll fit on your bike. Like 28 to 32, I think, is like a good range for your tire size.
That's what most people are shipping these days on most bikes, unless they're race bikes.
It's just and even then, I mean, the pros use 25s and they get paid to go fast.
Right.
So, put bigger tires on it. It's safer and more comfortable, and you'll have less problems. But the thing that I've been thinking of, and what I would call my first go-to thing for commuting, is my single piece of rain gear, and those are booties. I mean, it's the first piece of rain gear I put on. It's usually the only piece of rain gear that I put on. Everything else is the same thing that I rode in here today, and it was 55 degrees and sunny.
Yeah.
And so everything else is the same. You know, I wear leggings, I wear t-shirt or a long sleeve shirt, I wear the same jacket, which is a thin, single layer, windproof jacket that, you know, the fanciest thing about it is the sleeves will come off.
Oh yeah,
which is nice, because then I can go to work in the morning and then come home in the afternoon with just a vest to keep my core a little warmer. But booties, keep your feet dry.
Yeah, keeping them dry because that'll keep them warm as well. Nothing's worse than
and you got to
cold
put those
feet.
shoes on in the afternoon. And unless you work at the coolest place, that has feet or boot dryers.
Well, you can buy those. So I actually bought one of those for my office and my
spend
garage.
a lot of money on a lot of things.
I got one for $80. It's one of the hunting boot dryers. So it had 4 different sections where you put a pair of gloves and a pair of boots on it, and by the end of the day, they'd be dry. Now, my office mates did not like the smell, but I didn't do it for them. You know, I did it for my feet because I didn't want wet, cold shoes at the end of the day when I rode home.
Well, you know, and a lot of these commuter style shoes that they sell are, you know, suede rubber, or not rubber, suede leather, or they're some type of, like, they're supposed to look like street shoes. And so if you go riding in the rain in those things, they're going to get hammered and they're not going to last very long at all. And if you keep them dry, then they'll still look good. You know, you'll get a whole year's worth of use out of them.
Yep.
So I really recommend booties. And the WXBs, I think, if you can find them on the off season, they're pretty cheap, and they'll go around anything.
Yeah, they're very stretchy, seal skinny. What about you, Z?
I would say something related to tires. And I find that a lot of people don't do this. It's something that I do, whether I'm commuting, racing, whatever I'm doing. And I do this actually before every ride. It only takes a couple minutes. But I take a pick of some kind, and I go through my tire and I pick out debris, pieces of glass, sharp rocks, whatever. Because in my nearly 30 years of riding, it's, in my opinion, most flats occur from something in your tire from a previous ride. And you can prevent that. Nobody wants to flat on a dark morning commuting into work, right?
Right.
And if you can prevent that by picking pieces of debris out beforehand, you know, you're miles ahead.
So you're not the only one who does that. I actually used to do that myself, and I bought a light to put on my head so you could actually see the glass shimmering, the little shards of glass and little shards of metal from the street cleaners in your tire. And what would you use to fill up those gaps? Would you use anything once you actually picked out the debris?
If it's a sizable hole, I've used like shoe
I too have used shoe goo. I bought some silicone it was a marine store I bought it from, just to cover up some of just fill those gaps with like silicone paste or whatever. I also use super glue. Anything sticky and bendy typically worked out well.
And I might also put a glueless patch on the inside of the tire.
So now you're getting fancy. So I didn't want to take the tire off. I was lazy. I would typically do this before a really big ride too. Like right before STP, I'd like take all the air out of my tires and then go through them by bending them and squeezing them to try to find all these huge pieces of debris that I never thought was there. And it was almost all the way through. I would just pull it out and fill it up with glue and let it dry overnight and
Yeah.
ride 200 miles STP. That was probably not smart of me, but that's what I would do. What other tips you have besides tires?
One thing I would say about clothing, not everybody can keep extra clothes at work, but one item that's usually heavy and bulky is shoes. And if you can at least keep some shoes at work, then you don't have to carry those with you when you go in each time you commute in.
It's like a second pair of tennis shoes
Absolutely.
to walk around at work with.
Or dress shoes, whatever it might be.
If you're a fancy person, yes.
Yeah.
Unlike me, I get to wear tennis
Yeah.
shoes, but yeah, that's actually a really good plan as well. I used to take a really big bag on Mondays with all my clothes. I would have shoes at work, but all my clothes on Monday, and then pack it all back out on Friday. But then I started driving into work on the weekends when we would be doing errands or doing whatever we would do on the weekends. We would typically pass my office. I would have a bag full of 5 days worth of clothes in the back of the car so we could drop it off, so I could go a whole week without ever having to bring any clothes in. So I went from having a full rack with 2 pannier bags, a trunk bag, and all this gear that I would bring in every day, to riding like a race spec where I'd ride 14 or 15 miles to work with only my wallet and my keys in my jersey pocket. And it was pretty cool, but it took a lot of work to set that up, but it wasn't too bad. Before we came on air, we were talking about another hazard for commuters, and it's the little furry guys. So it's spring now, and anybody who's riding on any of the multi-use trails that happen to border a river or a lake or a forest, you're going to see bunnies. You're going to see other things that are going to run out in front of your bike. A friend of mine recently, and he may have called in the tip line with this tip this week, he got he got hit with, or he didn't get hit. He almost got hit with some ducks. And it wasn't like somebody was throwing ducks at them. He was on the Burke-Gilman Trail near UW, and they were coming at him at probably 8 feet in the air. He's riding his tandem with his kid and another one on the Piccolo. So he's basically a 3-person, and his other daughter's on her own bike. And they are just like beelining at his forehead. And he's like holding his line as long as he can, and they would not move. So he decided to make a change to his trajectory, put it in the grass, dumped it, broke his thumb, and the ducks just flew off, which is total bullcrap, those jerks. But I've had a similar issue on the Burke-Gilman, actually on the Smash River Trail with geese. So geese, they are mean. Not only do they poop all over the place and make the trail slippery as hell, they are coming after you certain times of the year. And the geese I have on my high definition video that I had taken that day, they were coming at me mouth open like they were going to bite my moving spokes. They have no fear. And they're like a small dog, so you can't hit them. Like, you can't do anything to get around the geese. So what do you guys do about animals when it comes to your commutes? You just bunny hop? What are you doing, Tom?
I'm pretty much riding straight.
Just going straight through it?
I'm just gonna knuckle up, and we'll see what happens.
Have you hit anything in your many years of riding? That's a sly grin.
It was dark. I didn't actually see it. I just knew there was something in front of me, and I felt a thump thump.
And did you hear anything after that, or did you just go about your merry way?
It was on the Myrtle Edwards Park, and it was pre-dawn.
Yeah.
So I think it was a rat.
Oh, okay. That's fine then.
I just kind of ran right over the
That's not
back
a cute
of it.
animal. It didn't have a name, probably.
No, I mean, what do you do with it? I think the biggest thing is the startling aspect, but because that'll cause you to jerk. But you just gotta go forward. If the biggest thing is dogs.
Yeah, dogs are terrible.
Because dogs will come at you, and most dogs just want to run with you, but you never really know.
Yeah.
And the thing I found really helpful with dogs, because I have seen and watched and heard of people that have injured themselves with dogs. As a matter of fact, at Grand Fondo Ellens, or Ephrata, 2 people had collarbones as a result of a dog attack, or different ones.
Man.
So it's to stay calm and grab your water bottle. Don't try kicking them or anything like that, because you could do something with your foot and cause yourself to lose control. But I always grab my water bottle and I just have it handy.
Right.
Give them a little squirt, and it usually encourages them to go somewhere else.
Now, you do a lot of forest rides as well with your gravel. Have you run into anything bigger than a dog?
This is the only time I run into dog. Oh, have I run into anything bigger than dogs?
Like something that would have eaten a dog?
I have seen interesting wildlife out there. Seen bobcat, and riding partner saw a cougar. I didn't see it. We've seen elk and deer, a lot of deer.
But nothing really bothering you. Everything
I
was
mean,
going
they
about its way.
usually, every once in a while, one doesn't know how to get off the road just right, but most of the time, they see you coming along before you actually, they're gone.
Right. Back to the dogs issue, one of the other things I found while riding the Smash River Trail frequently was the dogs that were alone were less of an issue than the dogs with an owner with a leash that would be between 3 and 30 feet long, and you never knew which one they had. So one of the things I would always try to do was I'd be coming up behind somebody walking their dog. I would immediately try to look for what kind of leash they had. Like look for a really thick strapped leash, so I know that it's not going to be 30 feet long. But if they had one of those little handles where you know it was wound up and their finger was probably not on that lock button, you could assume that dog, if they saw you and wanted to chase you, they were going to run out across you and probably string that leash across your bike. So being super aware of not the owner or the dog, but the leash. And if they have one, like I actually went over the bars because a lady had a dog by the side of the trail. The dog had a ball in its mouth, and she had been playing ball with the dog. That's great. That's really cool. Well, the dog knows how to throw the ball to itself by dropping it and letting it bounce and roll off. So sure enough, as I'm rolling along, she doesn't have her hands on her dog, doesn't have a leash, she doesn't even have a collar. The dog drops the ball, it goes across the trail, and it chases the ball like a dog will do, right in front of me. Yeah. So I flip over the bars, hit the deck. Luckily, I was able to roll, tuck and roll, like they tell you to do, tuck and roll, and not hurt myself. Broke a piece off the back of my bike as it tumbled as well. But the dog, I hit it right in the hip, and it made its typical dog yelp. So the adrenaline was flowing because, 1, I just hit a dog, and that made me feel really bad. 2, I just hit the deck, and I was really mad. 3, she was freaking out. And she was more worried about me than her dog, and I was more worried about her dog than me. By the time I realized that I wasn't hurt and the dog wasn't hurt, I said, I'm okay. Literally 5 seconds later, she is gone. Gone. Like hightailing it out like she just robbed a bank. And got no information from her about anything else. So I had to fix my bike on my own because it was her fault. I mean, she needs to have a dog on a leash, right? Anyway. Yeah. So yeah, be careful of dogs.
I've actually had a similar experience. My dog was a Doberman in that respect. So it was big enough to... if we had collided, it would have been a mess. Right. I would have felt terrible about that.
How about you, Z? You hit any animals? Man, this podcast is a downer.
I have seen a lot of squirrels, bunnies, roosters, chickens, and whatnot along the trail, but hips back, plow through them if I need to.
Hips back.
But no, I've been fortunate that I have not hit any.
Okay. Yeah. So switching topics.
I think the takeaway from this is stay off the multi-use trails. They're dangerous.
What is worse, the door zone or the 30-foot leash? That could be a topic for another podcast for sure. That would be a good one. So what other tips might you guys have other than the rain gear, the drying of your boots, the making sure you don't have debris in your tires, and watching out for animals that might want to get in your way? What other tips for the new Pacific Northwest bike commuter do you guys have to offer?
Regarding traffic, I would say just be hypersensitive, hyper aware. The motorists do not see you. You're invisible. Just constantly be scanning ahead, looking for cars. Anticipate that car that's coming out of that parking lot doesn't see you, and be ready to take evasive action.
Right. In all situations, don't trust a blinker. Yeah. Don't ever trust a blinker.
And don't trust the absence of a blinker.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so when I used to commute from Woodinville to up in Bothell, there was only a few sections where I actually had to get in the road, and I was lucky enough to have the trail for most of the way up to Redmond. But there are a few areas where you have to make a left turn from a right shoulder crossing 2 lanes of traffic, and that traffic would build up in the morning, and people are just annoyed that the traffic's building up. So you have to find your way either by filtering up and getting in the way of people so they see you, or taking your chances of sitting in traffic and smushing yourself. So one of the things that is a hot button issue for motorists or drivers or people that are in cars is when a bike filters up to the front and doesn't take their rightful turn. I actually had a lady, as I filtered up, I was taking a left, so I filtered up to the front so everybody could see me and I could get out of the way fast. She pulled up going straight and rolled down her window. She's like, we really hate it when you guys do that. Why do you do that? And the light had just turned red, so I knew I had maybe 20 seconds to talk to her. I was like, well, if I can get out in front of everybody, I can get out of the way faster, and I'm seen, so I don't get in your way, and I don't get hit. And immediately she said, that makes a lot of sense. It was the most reasonable and only reasonable person I've ever had an interaction with while riding a bike when they were in a car. It was amazing.
Yep.
So,
You've done, that's your good deed.
I know, right? I know. Everything's solved. We had no more problems.
Right.
But yeah, it was one of those things. So what do you guys think about like filtering? I know it's risky, especially when you're doing it between traffic. It's less risky when you're doing it on the right side of the road where you've got your own dedicated shoulder where you typically don't expect a car door to open. You don't necessarily expect someone to take a right turn, but they will. So be aware of that. But you guys filter up, like especially in Seattle where it's like crazy to move anywhere and you don't want to be between two cars, you know.
Well, I mean, I don't have very few sections of trail that are on my commute coming from West Seattle to downtown. There's a couple small areas, but especially with stopped cars, I'll always continue going to the light. I agree with you, is to clear the intersection as fast as possible.
Right.
And get out of the way.
Well, you ride really fast too. I'm slow. That's the problem. They didn't like when I went slow.
Well, I try to be really careful of, cars that aren't moving. I try to, get around them as fast as possible. When cars are moving, I'll generally try and be part of traffic.
Right.
But if cars are not moving, then I take advantage of my greater mobility and keep going.
And one of the tricks I used to use as well, like if I would come up to a left turn group of cars that was actually starting to move and I had a slot where I could fill in and be a normal vehicle, if I was taking a left turn on a left turn yield where straight traffic coming the opposite direction would have the right of way, I would actually stand up the whole time and try to get my head above the car in front of me so that the car that's going to come straight knows that there's other cars behind it and they don't miss you there, and there's not a confusion about there's another vehicle right behind that car. Now, whether or not it worked, don't know. Hopefully it did. But that's another thing, is like finding a way to be visible to all the cars in the intersection that may or may not make a decision that's going to impact you versus the cars that are right in front and right behind you in that line of traffic.
At a four-way, what I've done, and I don't even know if this is legal or not, but it's what I do.
It's okay, I'm not a cop.
Is I get up to the front to the front car and I'm on his blind spot, and I go when that guy goes.
Oh, you use him as a shield.
I right in their shadow, and so whenever they decide to finally move, like I go with them, and use them as a shield. Yeah. So I figured.
And if you're really tired, you'll hang on a little bit, right?
No, well, I saw a guy doing that the other day. It blew me away. I was like, whoa.
I used to do that as a kid on a skateboard. Super dangerous. Okay, Z, what about you?
Yeah, I've done that very thing as well at the four-way. But if there's a long line of traffic at a stoplight, for example, I mean, there's 15 cars and the right side's open, I'll move up to the front, but I will also do it watching every car, being careful, because any one of these could decide, oh, they want to go into this mini mart off to the side.
Right. So you walk up, tap on the window, say hello, go to the next car, tap on the window, say hello. Kind of take your time, make some friends.
Not quite, but
Not quite. Okay.
And then, and then if somebody says, hey, we hate, like your example, I say, you could do it too if you were on your bike.
I don't think that ever has converted anyone.
No.
So what about sidewalks? Like, do you guys ever hit the sidewalk? I know in Washington and King County it's legal. Other parts of the country it's not legal. I don't feel safe on most sidewalks.
It's far more unsafe to be on the sidewalk with all those driveways.
Yeah, unless it's a hugely wide sidewalk where nobody ever walks. Like there's a section between the 520 trail and on Leary where the sidewalk makes sense for maybe 100 feet, 150 feet to get to the light and then get on the trail again. But as far as the normal size sidewalks, they're just terrible.
And for actually as a lane as a way to get from here to there, I mean, I travel at 18 miles an hour most of the time. So I mean, that's just dangerous.
That's not sidewalk friendly at all.
No.
Yeah.
I don't belong on the sidewalk.
So if you get on the sidewalk, if you have to get on the sidewalk, like 3 miles an hour, walking speed.
Maybe not 3, but like certainly at very slow.
Right. Something reasonable where you can stop literally in 5 feet.
Yeah.
Or less.
It would be the car equivalent of parking lot speed.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. So any other final tips for the commuters? I know we've hit a lot. This has been great, actually. I appreciate you guys going deep on this for me. But any other commuter tips? Or just general people that are new to the Pacific Northwest? Like someone who comes from flat area that...
Get a single speed. They're awesome.
Yeah. They are not going to like that answer.
Yeah. Oh, no. Get a single speed. That's... So when I became a full-time bike commuter, and then now I'm a part-time commuter, but I didn't want to put the wear and tear on my road bike, on the bike that I would go out and exercise and went fast. and that I thought looked pretty.
Yeah.
So I got a single speed, and it's been a lot of fun because not only is my commute now an actual workout, and I can ride around the city and get a good workout, but I don't have the wear and tear on the components and the equipment, and it's easier to take care of and maintain. And
But the hills, man, the hills.
there's no hills on the bike trail.
That's a good point.
These major thoroughfares that go from neighborhoods to places where you work, it's all flat.
Yeah, that's true.
In Seattle, the biggest hill is 400 feet. Even if you had to go up that hill, it's not that bad.
Right. That's true. And are you running just a normal single speed, or are you running like a belt drive? Because I know belt drives are the cool thing these days.
No, that's next. Maybe the next build.
Cool. What about you, Z? One last thing.
Make a goal of riding once a week to start with.
Yeah.
Get the hang of it. Don't put too much pressure on yourself to start riding every single day.
Yeah, one of the things I ran into was that I had sore legs every single day for months when I started commuting every day. So much so that my wife would like graze my leg as we walked with just her hand, and I'd be down for the count. I mean, it was that bad.
I would say make it at least 2 days. Because if you do it one day, man, it's like, I didn't do it this week, and then it'll be like 2 weeks before you get back on your bike again.
Right.
That's a good point. Yeah.
You got to get a habit going. The most best thing, other than days like today, which were really nice, but the best part about commuting by bike is that my commute changes all of about 2.5 minutes from a day of no traffic to a day of monster traffic.
Yep.
And you can't, that doesn't happen in a car. I know that it's going to take me 32 to 35 minutes to get home.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter what's going on.
The only thing that impacted me was a headwind. And that was the biggest impact, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yesterday I made a wrong turn, got stuck in Mariners traffic, and there was 20 minutes right there.
Yep.
So I think that's one of the coolest things about bike commuting is that, your commute just gets dialed in, you know what it is, it's a given factor, and you just go do it, and you show up at your job and you're clear-headed and you're ready to go, and you get home and you've gotten your workout in, you've got some blood pumping through your body, you've put air in your lungs.
You have a reason to eat a big dinner.
And and your partner knows what time to expect you because it takes you this long. There's no, there was a overturned something or another in this thoroughfare and traffic is backed up and is heck everywhere. It's it's just a known thing.
Right.
So
very cool. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap this segment up. That was fantastic. I really appreciate you guys spending some time and talking about your commutes, and hopefully that will help other Pacific Northwest riders get more out of their commute, both veteran commuters as well as the new ones. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
The event of the week for this episode is the Seward Park Thursday Night Race Series. This year marks the 28th year of racing in Seward Park, and if you're into criterium racing, you will not be disappointed. Races take place inside Seward Park on a 0.8-mile loop, and the direction of the races changes frequently. There is one climb that is about 200 meters long, and one gnarly 140-degree turn on the course. The clockwise lap will last around 90 to 100 seconds for the fastest racers. A quick look at Strava shows the counterclockwise lap has a fastest time of just over 70 seconds, at a blistering 38.4 miles an hour. Race length is between 25 and 60 minutes, depending on the category, and there's also a race clinic available if you'd like to learn the tricks of the trade for criterium racing. Racing is $15 per race for men and $8 per race for women, and multi-race punch cards are available. You'll need a WSBA racing number to participate in these races. Numbers are not sold at the race, so come prepared with your number already purchased. There are lots of prizes to be had for the winners, and cash and merchandise premiums as well. For more information about the Seward Park Thursday Cycling Series, head over to thegroupride.com/SewardPark. If you like the show and want to help others discover it, please take some time to rate us on your podcast platform of choice. If you listen to us on an iPhone or an iPad, rating our podcast in the iTunes Store is a huge help, as the number of positive ratings will determine how easy it is for others to find the show. This week we have a review from Bike and Coog, who says, Wes is really informative and covers topics from events to top cycling news. Have already learned a thing or two from the podcast and can't wait for more. Thanks for the kind words, Bike and Coog. I'm learning a lot as well. Thanks for listening to episode 8 of the Group Ride Podcast. This show works best when listeners get involved, so help me out this week by submitting your tip to our tip line. The topic for this week is what is the most important tool in your saddlebag? Leave your tip via voicemail at 206-651-4161 or email an audio file with your tip to tipline@thegroupride.com. You can find me online at Twitter @thegroupridePod or on Facebook @The Group Ride Podcast. Follow and like the page and send me feedback about the show. You can also check out the website at thegroupride.com. You can send me feedback directly about the show or any episode of the show at podcastfeedback